In the West, you're used to a lot of mass media information. In the case of China, although the economic data is now readily available, the political machinations behind the scenes is something else. I'm TL Tsim. I'm a political analyst, and my company is called TL Tsim and Associates Limited. My background is very mixed. My first job was with the BBC External Service in the Chinese section. We broadcast radio programs primarily for a Chinese audience in the Far East. And then I became an administrator at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And then I started writing for the South China Morning Post and the Hong Kong Economic Journal. For the Post, I wrote in English. For the Journal, I wrote in Chinese. So I started up my, if you could call it a career, doing political analysis for the mass media. And then in 1994, I started my own company called TL Tsim and Associates. In the 1980s, just as China was opening up, I had the great opportunity to be working for a man who was then the leading financial guru in Hong Kong, a man called Fung King Hei. And with him, we went into China to talk about projects, investments, and the opening up of the market and so on. And in the course of those few years, I got to see a lot in China. And that got me interested in starting to concentrate on the Chinese political scene. Well, the Hong Kong people's relationship with the motherland, the sovereign power, China, is, I would say, very mixed, because on the one hand, everybody can see the economic benefits. You know, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index, for instance, would not be where it is without the Chinese money coming in. Hong Kong's property market would not be where it is without the Chinese investments. And the entrepot trade, import-export trade, the tourism, we are very dependent on China now. We have been for the last 20 years. But then the political dimension is something else, because people in Hong Kong want to keep their way of life. And their way of life is very different from the way of life which is in China today. For instance, we have free access to the internet, Google, we have press freedom, we have the rule of law, we are not subject to authoritarian diktats, instructions. We enjoy these freedoms. We always have, and we would like to keep them as they are. So there is starting to be now a lot of trepidation about what might happen in the year 2047, because the Sino-British Joint Declaration between Britain and China only covers 50 years from 1997. And 20 of those 50 years are now behind us. And looking forward, you've got a problem with mortgages. 30-year mortgages are the norm. You've got a problem with the laws. The laws of Hong Kong are essentially English laws, common law tradition, British trained barristers, lawyers, judges, and so on and so forth. If in the year 2047, we have an abrupt change and we close the chapter on all that and we switch to Chinese laws, Chinese judges, Chinese lawyers, that would create a real problem. So we are now in the process of looking at this seriously. And therefore, this has created the kind of unsettled, restless feeling among especially the young people of Hong Kong. Now, if you believe in the polls that universities and other organizations in Hong Kong conduct periodically, you will probably know that the level of support among young people for the current chief executive of Hong Kong, who is very pro-Beijing, is 4%. He has a support rate of 4% among young people. 96% of the youths in Hong Kong are against Mr. Leung staying on. This is a very damning conclusion for people to have reached. They probably did not realize that the problem would arrive so soon, 30 years before the year 2047. I think they were probably caught unaware, and I think they appointed the wrong person to be in charge at this particular moment in time, because he rather stoked the fire and then, hatched the problem, as it were, when it could have laid dormant for a few more years. Now, the problem having surfaced, Beijing would have to deal with it. And of course, as you put it, there is the possibility of what I call the sledgehammer approach, and the other alternative, which is the softly approach. At this point in time, we don't know which way it's going to go. Of course, we're hoping that Beijing would talk, communicate, have a dialogue with the young politicians of Hong Kong and the not so young politicians of Hong Kong, so that something which is supported by the community will eventually emerge. The economic situation is, until very recently, until the Lehman Brothers debacle, China's economy had been going very well. It averaged 9.6% GDP growth a year over the last 25 years or 30 years. And with that sort of growth, of course, some of that wealth would be filtering down. And if you go into any Chinese city today, you will notice a huge difference between China now and China as it then was 30 years ago. People's standard of living has improved. A lot of Chinese people can now travel outside of China, see the world, buy beautiful consumer goods like designer labels and so on. That's all happening. But since 2008, that economy has been gradually losing momentum. It's now, if you believe in official statistics, 6.7% GDP growth. That still makes China the fastest growing economy of any size in the world today. And so it is not really a problem that China cannot deal with. Chinese officials have said again and again that they have the tools. They have a toolbox with a lot of possibilities to deal with the problems at hand. So that does not really worry me. What we are looking at is capital flight is something that concerns a lot of people in the investment world. But when you look at it, you have to understand that a lot of that has to do with the fact that the borrowing in US dollars had to be repaid. If a company has taken out US dollar loans, and if the US dollar is as strong as it is, and the expectation of the RMB is that it will go down further, of course you would want to convert now and repay your loans. So that is one reason why the RMB has been weak and why there is capital flight out of China. The other reason is this anti-corruption campaign. It scared the wits out of a lot of people. And so, when the opportunity is there, a lot of the money has been coming out. I'm not saying all of it is corrupt money. I'm sure it is not. But, when a country is in that sort of situation, the smart money will want out. The third reason for capital flight is because you have a government in Beijing now which is actually actively promoting, encouraging outward investment. They're buying up the Astoria. They are investing in a lot of companies in Europe, I don't even have to name them. And when you do that sort of investment, and this is all official and lawful, legal, and so on, money will be coming out of China. So for the first time, I think last year, foreign direct investments going into China and China outward bound investments leaving China to invest in different parts of the world, they're roughly about equal. In fact, more money has been coming out than going in. I can only quote you what Premier Li Keqiang said. He said, and these are his exact words, China will not start a currency war. Notice he didn't say China would not participate in one. So if you're a Chinese official, you must be watching the yen, the yuan, and other currencies which will have an effect on China. And that is where we are at now. I think the G20 meetings will probably have discussed this. I think the consensus is we shouldn't have a currency war because this is no good for anybody. And the Chinese will go along with that. But, if you have a reversal of the trade surplus, for instance, if you're exporting less and importing more, at some point, of course, the RMB will go down and will continue to go down. Then you have the official from the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, saying the basis in the long term for a continuing devaluation of the RMB does not exist. Again, notice he said in the long term. So in the short term, I think we're looking at continuing weakness of the Chinese currency. I think even Chinese people like myself, who just read Chinese history books and don't really care about what happens in other parts of the world, have probably come to the same mistaken conclusion that I did, that Chinese dynasties are super stable structures, they last a long time, and that in between two long Chinese dynasties, you have a short period of civil war. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint my Chinese friends and students, but this is really not the case. If you talk about the length of these dynasties, I don't think any of them lasted longer than the Habsburgs in Austria, who ruled for over 800 years. Chinese dynasties, the last one, called the Qing dynasty, started in 1644 and ended in 1911. So let's say 260 years. That's not long compared to the Habsburgs. Right? And the second surprise is the Civil War period in between two dynasties can be very long. It can be over 100 years, 150 years, and so on. In fact, some people might argue that even today, Taiwan is still outside of the Chinese orbit. It is governed by the DPP. It is not yet de facto part of China. So, that is something most Chinese people do not understand. And it has a bearing on the way we go forward. And it is this. In spite of all the intelligence, the learning, and the experience of the Chinese people over 5,000 years, they have not come up with a system of government which can deal with the effective and peaceful transfer of power. In the West, you do it through the ballot box. So Brexit is Brexit. You accept it. But in China, the fight goes on. And eventually, dynasties fall for one of two major reasons. One, a popular uprising. Two, a fight among the generals. So it's a coup d'etat scenario or the Spartacus scenario. I call it Spartacus and Brutus. And that is no good for the country. My nightmare is not waking up on a Monday morning and being told by my assistant that there was a coup d'etat in Turkey. My nightmare, because I live in Hong Kong, is that I get told on a Monday morning that there had been a coup d'etat in Beijing and that it was not conclusive. And the two sides are fighting it out. That is my worst nightmare. I'm not concerned about popular uprisings, although there are about 10,000 cases of peasants throwing stones at public security offices and strikes and people gathering at traffic accidents, and then this erupted into social disturbance. There are a lot of those incidents. Why am I not concerned? Well, first of all, the country's gone from 300 US dollars per capita GDP to now about 7,000 or whatever it is. So it's become very rich. Standard of living has improved. We went through all that. But more importantly, these are isolated, localized, individual incidents. It's very easy to control these. You have 3,000 people gathering outside a police station for 2-3 days. What does it matter? In a country with 1.4 trillion people and spread over 9.6 million square kilometers of land, it's peanuts. It's not consequential. But what really concerns me and the Chinese leaders as well, because they did study the breakup of the former Soviet Union. They went to great lengths to understand why that happened. And they reached the same conclusion as I did. The problem was internal. The problem arose out of disagreements within the center of the party itself. And this is what they need to guard against. This is why you've seen the arrest of Bo Xilai, the arrest of Zhou Yongkang, who was the former security czar, a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. Right? Then you have the arrest of the two generals, General Xu and General Guo. Those are the players that could have toppled a government because they are strong. They have the backing of armed forces behind them. It's not, an incident in Guangzhou over the sale of land or over the construction of a water treatment plant or chemical and so on and so forth. Those things will not topple this government. We are in the age of nuclear warfare. Peasant uprisings are a thing of the past. The shortest dynasty of any size and power in Chinese history was the Yuan dynasty. I think they lasted just less than 100 years. This government, this administration, the Chinese Communist Party came to power in 1949. And so it's been around for 67 years. We don't know when something like the Russian collapse, the implosion of the former Soviet Union might take place. We don't know whether this is going to be the Yugoslavian model, when the country broke up into 6 or 7 parts. So to speculate on the timing of it is something I do not do. I have no handle on this at all. I would be the first to admit I don't know it, but I don't think anybody else knows it either. But it is not idle to speculate on the how this is going to happen. The most likely scenario is a power struggle overspilling into a coup d'etat and then overspilling into civil war. That would be the trajectory. And when that happens, I would say this, I don't think in the Chinese history you could find an example of the Russian model of breakup. When Gorbachev simply accepted the fact, or Yeltsin, that Russia will be Russia, Ukraine will be Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, all those will be breaking away, and all these stands in the Middle East and so on. That peaceful disintegration of what was the former USSR is very, very unlikely to happen in China, because they will fight. They would not have sat down and talked about it and then take the decision to simply allow this to happen. This is not the Chinese model. And sadly, I think we're not going to see a Yugoslavian model either, because there they did have a civil war, but the civil wars, the war was small in terms of size and scale and didn't last very long. That is not the Chinese model either. The Chinese model is a bitter, long-standing civil war, very destructive, very divisive. This is the real black swan.